Hello, Dominic here from the Bournemouth Writing Festival. Welcome to another interview with a local writer slash author. I'm planning to release an interview on YouTube every Monday evening around 6 o'clock. So if you want the latest interview in your inbox, then please click subscribe somewhere along here. Now, today I'm delighted to welcome Cassandra Clark. Now, originally Cassandra hailed from Yorkshire, and now she lives in Lymington. And she has written loads and loads and loads of books. And I'm sure we're going to delve into some of those in a moment. But she focuses on medieval crime. So welcome, Cassandra.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me on.
No problem. Right. So let's start from way back, because you wrote for radio and you didn't really start writing novels and fiction for a while. So why don't you take us through your writing journey up until where you are now?
Well, I've been thinking about this, and I see it in my entire life in 5 acts. And the first one, obviously, like every other writer, I used to write when I was a child. So I wrote my first one when I was 9, and it was called Mystery of the Haunted Lighthouse, for the simple fact that I didn't know there were any other books not written by Enid Blyton. I come from a very non-bookish family. So I wrote that and thought, oh, that's okay, and put it away, didn't know what to do with it. And then when I was 13, I got together with some friends. We entered a BBC television writing competition, and we had the brilliant idea, which we didn't realise was so hackneyed, that we would write about a play within a play. We'd write about some schoolgirls making up a play for television. We thought it was so original. But to our astonishment, we won. And that should have been my first television script. But in fact, we were all booked to go to Italy for a fortnight, so we missed it. It was really sad. However, I kept on writing and got into all sorts of reading philosophy at university. I got into some French novelist sort of stuff, you know, all the avant-garde stuff, and got a very nice handwritten letter from George Weidenfeld saying, really interesting, please send us your next one, which I was very proud of. That was when I was at university. And then, strangely, my first love is theatre. I think actors are fantastic. I don't know how they do it. They're sort of shamans, aren't they? I love them. I'm so in awe of them. And I really wanted to write for theatre because I used to go to the theatre every week with my parents. And if you remember the Solberg brothers, you won't remember them, but the Solberg brothers at Salisbury, they had a repertory company up in Hull, which was our nearest large town. And they used to put on plays. All sorts of famous people would turn up for a couple of weeks. And I longed to write for them, but I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to ask. And at school, they said, oh, just become a journalist. And I thought, oh, no, that's not what I want. So it was quite hard, really, knowing what to do. It was easy compared to what these poor young writers have to do now. The hoops they have to jump through, I think it's appalling. And I think they should be given more respect. But I sent off a radio play to the BBC, Into the Void, and it came back saying, yes, we like it, we'll do it. So they sent it to Alfred Bradbury, which is a long time ago, and he sent it to Tony Cliff. And he put it on after a lot of non-appearances, very ramshackle in those days. And then they commissioned more, and then suggested I got an agent. So again, I just fired off a script. They were wrapped in big envelopes in those days. No technology at all. Put it in the post box, and a fortnight later there was a phone call at 8:30 in the morning, and it was, good heavens, it was Peggy Ramsay. That may be a name not known to you now. I mean, I'm going back into the dark ages practically, but she was the agent. She was top. She was the queen. She knew everybody, and she had a little office in St Martin's Lane. And she rang me at 8:30, mouthful of cream cake, as she told me. She said, oh, darling, I love your script. Come down and see me. But sorry about this. I'm just eating cream cake. She lived in Brighton. She used to read scripts on her way up to town every morning. Brilliant woman. How fantastic. She just picked it up. Would that happen now? No, these poor kids are sitting around. Sorry, I'm ranting, but these kids sit around for months waiting for oh yes, we quite like it, but it's not really our thing. You know, poor things. How can they make a living like that? It's awful. Anyway, do stop me if I'm ranting too much. So I went down to see Peggy. The first thing she said was, "Oh, do sit in Joe's chair." And Joe, of course, was Joe Orton. So I very gingerly sat down. Was he'd just been murdered? And it was all very spooky and weird. But she was brilliant. She was so encouraging. And I was doing a lot of very strange stuff at the time. Street theatre, site-specific stuff. Street theatre was really interesting because if the actors were good, which of course they always were, they'd gather a great crowd around them. It was terrific. I loved it. I'd love to do that now, but of course you can't make a living from it. So that was it. And then I had a horrible divorce. I was married to a madman. And I needed to make some money. He took everything except, it's like Alan Bennett, except the clothes we stood up in. So I was thinking on this cliff edge, thinking, oh, what do I do now? And there was a meeting in, sorry, I'm rambling now, but this is how I started. It might encourage people. There was a networking meeting in York where I was living. And I think anybody starting out needs to network. You need to meet people and know them. And I went along thinking, oh, they'll commission a radio play from me, best I can hope for. And in fact, I met an industrialist and he said, oh, I'll introduce you to somebody who earns far more than I do. So there are all these lovely people along the way in the early years. And he introduced me to a marvelous woman called Sarah Craven. And she was rather abrupt. She said, oh, you want to write some romance? She said, I write romance. Just go away and read them for 6 months and then write one. And I thought, oh, that sounds straightforward. And I didn't know what romance was. I mean, I was philosophy, nothing about romance in my life at all. And I went along to Smith's and they had new books, but I think 12 books every month. And there were the 12 books. So I got a few of them, went back, read one a day, because they're very quick, very short, 65,000 words. And after about reading six days, I thought, I'll write one then. I can't wait 6 months, I've got to feed the children. So I wrote one and sent it into nothingness. And lo and behold, they picked it up. I've been so lucky. First radio play, first romance, my first theatre stage play at York Theatre Royal. People just said yes. And I thought, well, this is great. So I had a wonderful editor. But at the same time as all these people have been guides to me, there's been so many deaths. So Jackie, unfortunately, died quite horribly. She just recovered from cancer and then went out to celebrate with a friend. And leaving, she stepped under a bus. I mean, couldn't make it up. Well, I suppose she could. But she was great, really encouraging. And I thought, when I rang, she said, ring me. And I rang. And she said, oh, could you do something about this first sentence? It was a page long, obviously, in the steps of Kant. And I thought, oh, right. So I got it down to about 15 sentences. So then they published it. And that was it. And she said, be ready for this. She said, it's going to be an avalanche when the royalties come through. Oh, wow. They really were. I couldn't believe it. And again, I felt so lucky because they only took 2 new writers that year out of 30,000 submissions. And mine had been picked from the slush pile by a wonderful woman called Linda. I can't remember her second name, but she gradually took over the publishings when they joined the Americans. It's taken over by Americans.
So, I mean, wow, and there's so much to unpick in
rambling. Sorry,
we haven't even got to the end, but it's a where you got. So, a lot of the writers I speak to, they write or they wrote when they were a child, and then kind of life got in the way, and then they started to write again when things had calmed down or children had got a bit older. But it sounds like you've made writing a career.
Absolutely,
and it sounds like you were. I'm not going to say lucky. I'm going to say talented. So talented that things got picked up very quickly for you. And so I guess my question is writing a career for you? Is that? Do you call yourself an author? And talk to us a little bit about the finances of having children and writing at the same time.
Where do I begin? Yes, I've always wanted to be a writer. I've never thought of being anything else. And having a degree in philosophy, I could work for the Open University. So in the very, very early days, I was a tutor for them on the Humanities Foundation course. And that was just basically one evening talking to a bunch of people who were really interested and geared up and just fun, and then reading their essays. So that was great, and I did that for a few years. On the strength, I was accepted my interview. This is luck again, because my birthday was on the same day as the interviewer's husband. So, so she thought, oh, she must be good. I made money straight away from writing romance, and I'm so grateful to Alan Boone. But people sneer; they sneer so much, and actually, it's a skill, and you have to learn it. You know, people often don't realise that there are rules, and you just have to pick them up intuitively, I think, rather than go to courses and do it yourself, rather than sit there making notes that somebody who's probably never been published is telling you what to do. There's an awful lot of that around at the moment. I did that I was hoping to ride two horses at once. I was hoping to carry on with street theatre and the avant-garde stuff, Edinburgh Festival, all those things I'd done, and music theatre, which I'd worked with a composer and so on. And we had something on at Smith Square in London and made no money, of course. So I wanted to do that, keep on doing that, and write the romance as well. But I just found it really difficult. Children, teenagers, you know, it was quite hard. So I was lucky I didn't have to worry about money, which is good. And then I decided somebody asked me to look after a cottage just outside Cambridge. He was a Don. And while I was there, I volunteered at the Anarchist bookshop, and I saw an anthology of short stories. And I thought, oh, I've never done short stories before. And it was from úpla. It was Malcolm Bradbury's people. And by then I'd written about 35 romances, and I was looking for a change. My children were now growing up, university, drama school, and so on. So I applied, and I met Rose Tremaine. She interviewed me, and she said, oh, you will never write another romance again if you do this course. You realise that, don't you? I said, oh, fair enough. And then to prove her wrong afterwards, I did. I wrote 2 more, but don't tell her. I did write 2 more. And then disaster struck. I had a run of good luck up to this point. And then, bang, eyesight, couldn't see to write for 2 years. And I was writing my breakout novel on spec, good agent lined up, terrific. Everything was moving along nicely. Then my mother was ill. My father had a stroke, and that was it. And I'm an only child, so I had to go north and back to the East Riding. And I looked after them. My mother died, and my father went on for ages. In the meantime, I was getting a few awards for screenplays and so on. No money. They hadn't reached the money stage, but I was at least being able to live off the romance royalties, which were still pouring in, which was a great help. You know, Saint Alan Boone, I say. He saved our lives. And then I was commissioned by a theatre up north in Newcastle. And I wanted to write about, I would often write about science things if I'm writing contemporary stuff. And I was writing about dark matter. And I wrote a play which they liked and commissioned. And to write its, sorry, to do the final draft, I was invited to Edward Albee's Writer's Barn. I don't know whether you remember Edward Albee. He wrote Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, the film, and lots of stage plays. Sorry, he was very well known in America and over here. And I was invited to this huge barn. It was amazing. I got there significantly on September the 2nd in 2001, with my script waiting to be just looked over. And then my daughter rang next morning, 8:30. Oh, you're still there, thank heavens. I thought you were going up the Twin Towers. And that was the day they were smashed down. It was horrible. And it seemed especially awful because my play was about 4 people, 2 scientists, a truck driver, and an American spy, CIA chap. And they were victims of an explosion underground in the deep mine where the dark matter experiment was being run. And they were in that liminal space that George Saunders calls the bardo. It's the liminal one between life and death. So in effect, they were all dead, assessing their lives in those few minutes. So it wasn't a very cheerful thing. I think that there are jokes in it and banter. They themselves are, they're still alive in their minds.
I just
So
want to
it's significant that that was on when the trials came down. It really, that was it.
Sure. I just want to go back to something you said, very kind of blasé in a way, that you had 35 romance books out, and I know that you've got a 12-part trilogy of medieval crime. How do you I think for me especially, I find it quite difficult writing one book, but you've got so many books out over the years. How do you kind of go about writing so many books? Do you have a set formula, and that your audience likes and keeps buying, and where do you get your ideas from to write so much?
I don't know. I don't think I do write a lot, say, compared to people like Joyce Carol Oates. She's written loads of books and they're all different. And writing genre stuff, which the romance was, and the later crime novels are, there's a fairly obvious system, isn't there? In crime, you've got to have a body, haven't you? And then you've got clues and suspects. So it's all very straightforward. But I do have a routine when I'm starting. What I used to do through the crime novels, I would do the research in the autumn. But I hate fantasy fiction. I think it's evil. It should be banned. I used to do my research then, lots of footnotes, lots of time in the British Library and various places like that. And then in January, beginning of January, once New Year was over, Monday morning, 8 o'clock, sit down, open the screen and start. And then I would write it, not do much else.
So therefore, when you're doing your research, do you already have a plot, a theme in mind, or are you researching and finding and just seeing where the research takes you?
I don't know. I'm just interested in how things work and what they did. And each one seems to have a little bit of a theme. The first one is simply that sleuth. I wanted to write a woman sleuth because of Brother Cadfael. Everybody loved that. And Derek Jacobi was so good. And I imagined Hildegard, somebody like Uma Thurman or someone being Hildegard, but that hasn't quite worked out. But she would start off, and always in this one, I think, the prioress who's in charge. She is the sister of the Archbishop of Canterbury. No, the Archbishop of York. And he was banned and sent into exile. So he was a tough guy. He was known as Fiery Neville. And this prioress is his sister. So you can imagine she's pretty fiery too. And she runs this very tight-knit group of nuns at a place called Swine, which exists up in the East Riding of Yorkshire. And the main abbey, Cistercian, run by the guys, is at a place called Meaux. Still there in foundation form, and lots of things discovered about it. I was very interested in that, as it came to me in a dream, and I knew nothing about this particular period. And it's so interesting. We should all know. People are obsessed by Tudor cod pieces and all that stuff like claptrap. But in fact, the best period is Richard II, because it's when democracy was founded here. The House of Commons has acquired a speaker for the first time from ordinary people. The peasants had their revolt, and they weren't just peasants, but they were slaves in bondage to their Norman overlords. But when there was the Black Death, they suddenly realised that they were in great demand. It's a bit like working gardeners and cleaners in Lymington. Great demand, they can call their own price. And that's what they did, and that's what the Peasants' Revolt was about. So now suddenly there were all these people who were out of bondage. Brilliant. Very early in Europe. So over there, I mean, they were still carrying on in chains, basically. So it's a very interesting and powerful and important period. And it was fascinating writing about it. But how did they live? When I started, I didn't even know what they drank out of. Didn't know what they drank. So I had to research all that. The import of wine from Germany and France, for instance, and how they made their mazes, which is this sort of cup with two handles. I didn't know they had a thing like that. But there they are, and you see them in museums. So interesting. And then I was interested in stained glass. So I thought I'd set one in York, in a glass factory, glass workshop. And that's amazing. How do they get stained glass? Does anybody know? Well, they have to import the glass, flatbeds from Germany, because it's apparently they have the right sound. So then they come to drawing it, and it's a great craft. And I made some up in York at the Conservation Centre. I was very lucky to have found that, and they showed step by step what to do.
Well, it's great. That's you've kind of gather all of your research, and then kind of find out all those interesting bits, and then create a story around that. I think that's fascinating, because I know a lot of writers, they research right as they go along. So it's understanding how other people, other writers do it.
Yeah, I like to do it all at once and let it settle. And I like to walk the ground as well, because the last book before lockdown was set at Beaulieu Abbey, which was completely new to me. And it's got lots of granges. It was a brilliant system. And I walked the ground, and then it's so confusing, because the granges are quite distant. How do you get there? By horse, whatever. And I wanted to do it once more, but I couldn't, because we were locked down. So I had to go and stay with my family and leave Beaulieu.
So to finish with, Cassandra, I mean, you've had such a varied and interesting, fascinating career, meeting famous agents, and getting things published and put on at the theatre and stuff. What advice would you have for somebody either just starting out, or kind of in the midst of writing, or even kind of finishing their manuscript and getting ready to query? What advice would you give people?
I would say never give in. Never give in. I don't know what steps you would take these days. It is so different. And just picking up stage this morning, Lynn Gardner's got a piece here. It's really a golden age for new writing. Young playwrights have little chance of getting their work staged unless they do it themselves. I mean, how can you run a career like that? It's appalling. So never give in. You've got to find your way around. There's an obstacle, go around it. Is that okay?
Great. Well, Cassandra, fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much. What a career you've had. I think there's an autobiography or memoir coming out soon, surely.
I do have a fictional book on the go at the moment. Fiction entirely.
Cassandra, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. And for the rest of you, hope to see you at our next interview, hopefully being released on Monday evening. Again, remember to press the subscribe button along the bottom, and we shall see you soon. Thank you so much, Cassandra.
Thank you. You've been so sweet and kind to me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And for the rest of you, hope to see you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.